Mama's in control. Another day, another podcast. Okay, here we go, ladies. I have a very special episode for you today. I'm interviewing Whydham Wood, who is the ghostwriter. She is a writer I've hired and have fallen in love with to help me pull this book out of me. I always say, or before this process, I always said I needed like a midwife, somebody to help me birth this book. And Whydham has painfully, slowly walked me through this process and also taught me, more than I could ever give her credit for, and more than I ever knew possible through this book writing process. So today we're going to be talking about, just pulling back the curtains about what it feels like to be a writer and her love of writing and how that started and a little bit of her story. She's a New York Times bestselling ghostwriter and a freelancer. Her love of writing, she's also a mother, and her love of writing has been strong in her bones since the day she can remember. And so she talks a little bit about that. So before we dive into the episode, I wanted to let you know that Whydham will be coming to my one-day mastermind event, which is taking place on February 22nd in Windsor, Ontario. And tickets are now on sale, so you can check that out at momisincontrol.com/1 day. The intention for this day is to get like-minded women surrounded in a group, helping each other cultivate our potential. And my love of writing, or lack thereof, my love of supporting women, my love of writing, my love of being of service to the world, and I giggle about that because Whydham and I talk about my love of writing, or lack thereof. But my passion to help women all started with parenting, and then realizing that there's something deep within us, that it's not about parenting. Yes, we want our children to grow up to be happy, calm, and confident kids, and there are tools and strategies to do that. But really, it's about who you become and how you show up for your children, so that you can create the space for them to become that person. So there is no magic pill. I'm sorry to say that. You have to do the work. You have to show up. And in my own personal life, surrounding myself with like-minded people who are there to move mountains in their own life, to feel in alignment, to feel energized and alive, and maybe make a difference. Whether you have a business or not, you don't need to have a business or a desire to write a book, but maybe there's something deep within you that wants to be expressed out into the world. And Whydham is going to be hosting a workshop at the February one-day mastermind. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you head on over to the website and purchase your tickets now. If you have any personal questions before doing so, go to support@heatherchauvin.com. All right, ladies, let's dive in. This is Whydham Wood, ghostwriter and author.
All right. Welcome, Whydham. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Okay. I'm really excited. One, I want to say thank you for having this talk with me. The roles are usually reversed. You're usually drilling me and making me incredibly uncomfortable. So I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to do that to you today.
Great. I'm looking forward to it.
So I wanted to share your wisdom with my community for multiple reasons. One, I'm so excited you're going to be coming to the one-day mastermind February 22nd.
So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yay. I'm so glad you said yes. I just knew, through the process of working with you, it's been a game changer in my own personal life with the book and, just creativity and really understanding, especially as women. I find it's really hard for us to ask for help. I've talked about this a lot, and how you and I have talked about this, where I felt like a failure because asking for help when writing my book, which is so weird. Isn't that weird?
No, honestly, it's fairly common from where I sit. I think writing process can feel very overwhelming. And especially when you're running a business and you've got an audience who needs to hear from you often, and there's a lot to do every day, and taking the time out to write a book when you're already doing so much. I think so many people struggle with it. And it's a very personal journey, and an intense one that I'm sure we'll talk more about. But honestly, I think your experience is, from where I sit, is very much the norm.
So I'm not a weirdo.
Well, I mean, no, I'm kidding.
Aren't we all just concerned? Isn't that like the main core of am I alone in the world? Do you find that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think there's so much we don't talk about in our experiences. And so then we assume we're alone and we're the only people, when in fact, what we're experiencing is so common. But because we're not supposed to talk about this stuff, then we kind of hold it in and assume that we're the only ones. And that makes us weird or small or, not enough or whatever it is, when in fact, our experience is incredibly normal.
Yes, exactly. And this is why I love having these heartfelt conversations, because once you know you're not alone, then we can get out of our own way and create what we want in our lives. So I'm like I said, I'm super excited to have you come and teach the women. What are you going to be doing at the One Day Mastermind? And then I want to dive into kind of your journey as a writer and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, I feel very passionately about women sharing their stories. I think it's so important. And there's so many, you look back in human history, not to get too conceptual here, but I mean, honestly, women haven't had the chance we haven't been able to use our voices historically at all. And I think there's such a movement toward women, speaking out, stepping into leadership in so many different ways, in all kinds of parts of our lives, and locally on a bigger scale, on so many levels. And I think for us, sorry about
life.
Yeah, exactly.
The old-fashioned landline.
The old-fashioned landline. I have one on my desk. I do. It's probably a spam caller. So
that's so funny. Go ahead. This is life. I don't cut this stuff out.
Yeah. Well, look, yeah. And I'm a mom just like you are. And so all this stuff kind of blends together in every day. But I just think it's so important for women to share our stories, because people haven't heard our stories nearly enough. And I think we can learn so much from each other and heal so much by hearing each other's stories. And so I think at the event, I want to help people, take their stories and make them relevant to the reader. Using small pieces of our story, the idea of kind of, we all have superpowers. We all have things we're really good at, and we know it, even if we don't really admit it all the time. And how those can help other people, other women, really is my focus.
Do you think so I love this conversation, because you and I have talked about this in great depth, where I said, you don't have to be a woman in business to share your story, right? Like, we all want to make an impact, not all of us, but the ones who have a desire to make an impact, you can share that out in the world. But there was something that you said about sharing it in a way where you can help your reader. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think, look, at the end of the day, I think all in some level, kind of fascinated with our own selves, our own lives, our own thoughts, our own feelings. And I think that's a good thing. The thing as a writer, I think it's important to remember, is the reader is equally fascinated and focused on her own life and her own experience. So when your story brings her value, it's important to relate it to her experience and contribute something, give her something to think about, something to feel, a laugh, some kind of experience, but something that makes it relevant to her, because that's what she's there for. Maybe also to be entertained or just enjoy or whatever it is, but give her something that is valuable to her by telling your story. And I think it's the interplay between telling your story, but also making it relatable and making it something that has value to the reader. When you can do those two things, I think that's a powerful combination.
So there's a way of getting your stuff out. It's not like verbal diarrhea and just putting your diary out there. It's like, what's the teachable? What's the lesson? And allowing the reader to be inspired by your story.
Exactly.
Before we dive into your story, you mentioned something about genius, your personal genius. In my perspective, this comes so naturally and easy to people that they just think everybody else in the world knows how to do that. What's been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're all good. There's things we all just are good at that we just don't give ourselves credit for. We don't recognize the value. And then part of it, again, goes back to the fact that, there's so much we all don't talk about. And so we might be surprised by how valuable the things that we're good at, our superpowers, are to other people, because we just take them for granted, And I think they can come in all shapes and sizes, and they're not always skills or, having a business or anything even that official. I mean, things like, I remember when my son was a toddler, the superpower I needed that I didn't have was getting him to put socks on. There are simple things, and, that's obviously just, a silly thing. But honestly, there are all kinds of things that we're all good at that we don't realize how much value they could bring to other people. And I think sharing some of that with other people is important. That's a valuable part of our stories.
And so I think this is such a juicy topic, because when you are you, I want to talk about the importance of getting an outsider perspective, because working with you, I was like, okay, I'm ready. This year I'm going to work on my book. And I would not be where I am right now in this process without an outsider perspective. 100% no, I would just continue to run away from it. And I'm like, how do you get enjoyment out of writing? That is not my genius. You've told me over and over again, this is not a baby, don't overcomplicate this, Heather. And you've really you've given me so much permission to take the pressure off. This is it. Just like if you had to get the kids on the bus or, feed them breakfast and give them a bath, this is just another everyday thing that you can do. And it's really helped me dive into these are just simple daily action steps that I need to take in order to achieve the bigger goal that I desire, rather than putting this big drama and story around it, putting all this pressure on myself. It reminded me of the whole, this whole culture of suffering and exhaustion. And I'm like, no, Heather, this is not how I want to feel during this process. And I'm totally moving away from what I was going to ask you, but it was the importance of asking for support and having an outsider perspective. I think that actually makes a story a lot stronger.
I think it's very hard to encapsulate your own story for anybody, for any of us, really, to step back and see ourselves, as others can see us. And I think that's just being human. I think that's just a universal experience. So, and there's also a memoir piece to your book, and it's especially hard in some ways to write a memoir, because it's so hard to step back and see ourselves in our lives the way that others do. And so, I do think I think getting help is very important. And I also think that, the writing process, we can get into this in more detail if you want, but it is a more, it's not just about sitting down and writing. There's so much, I think, that comes up that surprises people, having to dig into, being seen on a different level, being heard, and approval, validation versus telling your truth. There are many layers to it, and it's a bigger process than actually just sitting down and doing the writing.
Right. And I think we should talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to turn the tables and say, so you're a New York Times bestselling ghostwriter. How does that land for you? How did you get there, Whydham?
How did I get there? It was kind of a long and winding road, and then suddenly it was just bam, right in front of me.
Overnight success.
Yeah, not exactly. Well, it's funny. I grew up in New York City, which was in a lot of ways, as an introvert, a great place to be because you spend so much time observing life and people and so many different experiences and kinds of people who go there and live there and come there and are in and out of that place. So, and then I think in terms of writing, one of my earliest and most formative experiences was absolutely 11th grade AP English, Mr. Brody. He looked like he was right out of Dead Poets Society.
God.
An old like corduroy, probably Brooks Brothers blazer, but probably had been wearing the same blazer for 30 years. Just threadbare almost. And he was very strict about writing and would give these really hard essay assignments. And they were absolutely one of my favorite assignments, really. And he did not believe in giving A's. And so the best you could ever ask for was an A-. And he would, after grading them, announce he would read the best and the worst in the class. And you didn't know which was which at first. And I remember several times he read mine out, they ended up being the best. But I remember sitting there just absolutely terrified, but then also thrilled. And those essay assignments I would bring home and just lose track of time. You just be at my desk, which was not a typical homework experience for me. And it was my first experience of just diving into writing and suddenly looking up and thinking, oh my gosh, what time is it? I haven't eaten. I haven't done anything in hours. So that was a big, early kind of formative experience for me.
That's such a big key for people. Like to know when you're in that space of flow or genius or something that lights you up so much that you forget to eat. Like you're just in it and you love it and you can't get enough of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still to this day, when I really get engrossed in writing, will just completely lose track of time. And I love that. I wouldn't want to set that bar for new writers, though, I have to say, because I think that sets an expectation that that's always going to happen, which is not the case. And we can get into that too. But it's a gift when that happens, but that is not, that's kind of the whole inspiration writing topic that is kind of separate but related. So it doesn't always happen. When it does, it's magical.
Well, I definitely don't get that experience when I'm writing, but I do get that experience when I'm coaching women. And right. I can associate that feeling of losing track of time and just loving what you do. And I think it comes back to this, like, I always think of like women helping women and collaboration where, I will stay in my area of genius. You can stay in your area of genius. We come together and we make magic happen collectively. That's just you and I, but imagine having like the more and more and more women you have together, knowing and when I say area of genius, it's just something that lights you up that you love doing. Right. When you collaborate and everyone's kind of staying in their own lane, like, holy crap, there's true magic that can unfold. And I think too many of us get in our own ways. Well, we all do at some point, and sabotage that and thinking we have to be the genius of everything. We have to know everything. We have to do everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, as women, certainly it's so many of us struggle with perfection and expecting perfection of ourselves. And, and then always just measuring ourselves against an impossible standard. And part of that is, again, expecting ourselves we can handle everything, we can do everything. And of course, none of us can. It's impossible. And it's so important for, I think, women to work together to bring their individual geniuses, into a group where they can collectively, create something amazing.
Yeah. So after high school, because that was in high school when you found your love of writing, what happened then?
Yes. Long, winding road happened. I had to get a real job and, writing, who couldn't possibly make money from writing, So years went by and I finally just hated every job I'd had so much that I decided, forget it. I think I was 27 and I said, forget it. I'm out of here. I mean, I was getting steady promotions. I, was on a quote unquote good career track, but I couldn't take it anymore. And so I quit my job.
What field were you in?
I was in marketing and advertising, working for advertising agencies. So, but not in a creative role, in an account management role. And I didn't want to write copy, which was what the creative role as a writer would have been. And so I just said, forget it, I'm out of here. Got a lot of raised eyebrows and not a lot of negative, feedback, but I took out a loan. I moved across the country to Seattle all by myself. Didn't really know anybody there and just decided I'm not going to let fear run my life anymore. And my plan was to go bartend at night and then write during the day. But when I got out there, bills had to get paid. I was so poor. And when all my friends, Becky's, were, their careers were taking off or whatever, I mean, I was choosing between, am I going to take the bus or, it's hot out, I really need a bottle of water. I mean, I had to pick one or the other. And ended up temping, not bartending, and hated it, but tried to write as much as I could, but spent most of my time working just to get by. Eventually got, a better job, which I still hated, but met my husband. We started a business together. Long story short, more years went by. And finally, I just said that enough is enough. I have to start writing full time. And I got a first client, which was not doing necessarily the kind of writing I wanted to do. But at that point, I, was, done with the idea of trying to get the perfect scenario away, which I think I had always used to avoid my fear that I was going to get rejected. So I went for it. And then really the universe stepped in and they passed my name along to a few people. And suddenly I had, several clients and was ghostwriting, which is not something I even knew what it was, to be honest. I, just was writing for people as far as I knew. And I was trying to write as they would write. I mean, I didn't know ghostwriting was a thing. And then started writing, would you write my book? Would you? And one thing led to another. And then, a couple books ended up at the top of the New York Times list. And there it is.
And no big deal. And that's your story. Okay. So when I'm listening to you, the thought came up. I'm like, I wonder what it would be like to be an introvert and a bartender. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah.
Like,
I never thought about that.
Sucking the life out of you. One time I worked at a restaurant and I was the hostess and I could not be a server because you've met me. Everything shows up on my face. I can't lie. Yeah. I can't be like, how are you today? I don't care. You're an asshole. Right? It's like, I can't do it. And that being in the public all the time can suck the life out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would have. Absolutely. And I went to bartending school, but then
what's your favorite drink? What was your favorite drink to make?
The funny thing is I'm not a big drinker and I never have been. I mean, never. And I don't drink hard alcohol. Rare times I'll have a glass of wine, but I mean, I'm not, and I never was. Even in college, I wasn't a big drinker. In fact, for a part of college, I didn't drink at all. And so it was fun. I don't have a favorite drink.
But you know,
I learned how to make them.
Yeah. You're like, I love this. People buy you a shot. You just like pour juice in it or something.
Yeah, exactly. Can I have water?
Yeah. You know what I find interesting though? How too often we tell ourselves, I have to do this to make money, rather than keep following like that desire or soul craving, because your desire to write never went away. It's always been inside of you. Like it's always been there. And the more, like in the back of your mind, it was like, right. And then, you know, society comes in and says, but how are you going to make money doing that? Right? Like that's not sustainable until you kind of just, you're like, enough is enough. I'm going to go for it.
Yeah. So I got to a point where I felt like I didn't have a choice and I had struggled with depression even when I was fairly young, but certainly I realized that me not writing was, you know, becoming a big part of being depressed. And that if I wanted to feel better, if I had any chance of feeling better, I had to start writing again. And so it was almost like I felt like I was still scared shitless, but I didn't have a choice.
I love that. And I know we don't have to put a disclaimer here about obviously seek medical support if you are in that state. But I have seen, even in my own life for years and years, it was like, Heather's the weirdo, Heather's different, Heather's this. But the more I honor myself and go, what do I want? What do I need? And go after that, I feel more in alignment. And those thoughts and feelings, you know, eventually I understood what they were. And it was like, oh, okay, more of this, more of me, more of me, more of me, right? Because we're trying to be someone that the world wants us to be, and we forget about who we are.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, you know, that is also so much part of the writing, certainly especially the book journey. But even writing for a blog or social media or whatever it is, you know, is coming out and being who you are in front of other people, right? Being more of, you know, each of us being more of me or ourselves in a more public way. And that takes an enormous amount of courage. And, you know, look, it's also something that I can personally relate to because, you know, as a ghostwriter, you know, you're not very visible. And so, you know, for me to come out and be visible is an experience I also, you know, have struggled with myself. And so I think, you know, most authors, even who already have a very big platform, you know, getting to a book level, you know, it's a big transition. And not just in everyday experience, but, you know, in each person, in yourself, really. Mm-hmm. And how much you're willing to risk and how much you're ready to share of yourself.
Yeah, because it's someone can judge something about you, but kind of when they're judging your insides, when you put them out there, it's more vulnerable. It's one thing to say, oh, that outfit doesn't look good on you. It's another thing to say, you're writing this shit.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, too, you know, the thing we have to remember is how also the primitive brain is so oriented toward negative experiences. You know, there are all kinds of studies about how much more the primitive brain weighs negative experiences as it does positive experiences. I think they found that in like relationships, you need, for every negative experience, you need 5 positive ones to equal out the one negative. So we also have to remember, you know, I think that kind of negativity bias applies also to any kind of being vulnerable creatively, personally, you know, which as a writer, any kind of expressive art, really, you know, it's a similar issue, because any one negative feedback, comment, review, whatever it is going to you can easily let it outweigh the 50 amazing positive, reviews or feedbacks or, whatever it is that you get. And so it all just circles back to, I think, being human.
Yeah. I think we forget that we're human, especially when we're going after our ambitious goals. Once you escape this, and I say escape, but it's like you jump outside of the box, the norm, right, of mainstream culture, and choosing not to live by default anymore, right? Consciously creating a life that you want, whether it's emotional states or, financial states or whatever. And there's this awkward, vulnerable transition of jumping outside of that. And then when you've made a commitment to stay outside of that chronically, I mean, when you were just speaking, I was thinking about, of course, the first thing that pops up in my head is the practice of gratitude, and how living that way is a conscious dedication. It's commitment. It's not, I'll do it when I have time or when I feel like it. No, right. Like you got to, I notice food is big for me, that, for most of my life, I just ate based off of how I wanted to feel in my clothes, right? If I needed to lose a few pounds, and you eat less, the whole diet mentality. And then jumping into, how do I want to feel in my body? I want to feel healthy and strong, but literally noticing that if I eat a plate of nachos, I can have anxiety the next day, almost debilitating anxiety. I'm like, from eating a damn chip, like, this is ridiculous. So the cleaner I eat, the cleaner I feel emotionally and mentally. And it's kind of the same thing with your thoughts, right? Like, the cleaner your thoughts are, the cleaner you're going to feel in your life, but everything is connected. Which is why you have to do this work consciously and intentionally. Do you think there was any intention, like when you talk about, I know I keep going back to the New York Times bestseller, I would really like to know your experience working with authors as an outside, and I still call myself a newbie, and I still haven't identified myself as a writer. You and I have had many conversations about that. I'm a podcaster, I'm a coach, I'm a verbal processor. What are my other stories that I tell you? But working with authors, you see people that reach a certain level and you just assume that they're better than everybody else. But would you be able to share anything working with authors and some of the human emotions and experiences that they feel during the process? Like, I know we hinted on that a little bit, but just kind of debunking some of the myths that go on around writing and becoming a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really comes back to, we're all human. I mean, everyone's putting their pants on big time. And I think when it comes to, I think we do kind of glamorize people at a certain level, and they're just as human as we are. And there's a lot of fear around being seen at, on a bigger, broader stage. And I think, frankly, almost everybody, when you get to kind of stepping out as yourself in a bigger way in front of more people, at some point encounters shame. I am not good enough. They're not going to like me enough. What I have to say isn't, fill in the blank, whatever, the relevant enough, good enough, whatever it may be. I think there's inevitably, almost everyone encounters shame, at the end of the day, I think is the most debilitating thing. And it's not that you ever, I don't think, fully get over it. Oh, I'm over that. I mean, you feel like you are relative to where you once were, but then you step out an even bigger level and whoops, there comes knocking at your door again, And it kind of comes back to that whole idea of this being a journey, like you just said, something you continually practice, and yet never perfectly. None of us ever do it perfectly. You were talking about eating. And as you know, I'm a big believer in, caring for your body in a way that makes you feel good. Like, I don't care. I'm not a person who prescribes diets or feels that there's some prescription at all. I don't live that way myself, but I like to feel good. So I try to do things that make me feel good. And I think, none of it is perfect, and I think the same is true with the book journey and author journey. You get to a certain level, but then again, you step to a different level, and what you thought you were over comes knocking at your door again, because this is a bigger, broader level you're at. And I think you just keep chipping away at all this stuff, the fear and shame, and also just overwhelm. There's a lot of work involved. And even once the book is written, there's an enormous amount of time and energy that has to go into marketing the book, promoting the book. And so it really is, it's an ongoing journey on so many levels, of integrating it practically into your life, into an already busy schedule, and then having this very profound emotional journey, which really everyone I've worked with has gone through. And at the same time, it is also, you get through it, as with any challenging journey and experience, you get through the other end. And, it's an incredible feeling of, wow, like I didn't give up, first of all. It was so hard at times and I wanted to hide, but I kept going. And so there's also just incredible inspiration and joy and, excitement and celebration in the process also.
You won't let me hide.
No,
I
will not.
I think that's the beauty of having like a writer or coach behind you. When you're about to embark on, because I always tell people you need to surround yourself with those people. But when you have somebody, it's not, I've had people say to me like, Heather, you scare me. And I know I can be pretty scary, but when we first started working together, it wasn't you that scared me. It was my potential, because I knew someone was going to hold me accountable and help me get there. It's not just about accountability, but believe in me and help me get to where I want to be. And I think that's truly what we're afraid of, is our potential. I was curious though, when you were talking about this, I'm not enough, and how, that comes up. Does that ever happen for you when you're literally writing for other people?
All the time. All the time. I mean, I don't remember the last time I went through a full day without feeling that way. Mm-hmm. And this is why, it's interesting talking, just listening to people talk about writing in the world. And you hear, I feel like there's so much mythology out there, and I could go on and on forever about it, and I won't, because it'll take too long. But the whole idea, we were talking about kind of being in the zone before, where you lose track of time. And it happens more often for me now after all these years, but the whole idea that you have to be inspired to be creative, I think, is a very, largely talked about limiting belief, frankly. Mm-hmm. And I think people would be surprised how many writers sit down consumed with self-doubt and recrimination and, fear, dread, whatever, reading through what they did yesterday with, regret and what was I thinking? And, all the thoughts you would think would kill creativity are there. Absolutely. And all the emotions, everything. And the key is not to let that stop you. And it's like, all right, that's where I am right now. Who cares? Keep working.
It's that's like waiting for motivation before you work out.
Yeah, exactly. It's just get to the gym. And maybe when you're halfway through your workout, you'll, feel motivated. And maybe you're just having one of those days where you're just tired all the way through your workout. And the same is true of creative endeavors, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing is not to let the feeling stop you, even though it's really hard. At that point, shame is going to start to take over. This sucks, and this, and it's like back to work. That's that's what I do every day.
I find the more committed I become to anything, whether it's working out or eating or, this book or, I don't know, hitting a goal, which is really, I'm not focused on the goal. I just podcast about this. I'm not focused on the goal. I'm focused on the daily actions and showing up for those every day. The louder the I'm not good enough and the shame, like you said, gets louder, right? So the skill that I've really had to discover how to master is a thought is just a thought. It doesn't create your reality. And this year I decided to do a podcast a day, and people are like, you're crazy. I'm like, well, of course I want to give to the community, but the reason why I did it was because I wanted to be committed to my craft. And I also wanted to get out of my head. So if I am podcasting every day, it's like writing every day. I have to hit submit regardless if I feel like my words were good enough. And that has really allowed me to get outside my comfort zone. And the I'm not good enough, this sucks, this is crap, people are going to judge you, gets really loud. And then all of a sudden I get these messages of like, thank you, I needed that. And I'm like, this is so weird. So it gets you out of your own way to just put things out into the world. Of course, people are always going to judge you, which I just think is a reflection of their own insecurity and their crap, because usually it's the people, the whole Brene Brown thing, the people in the arena who count. You see people who are acting courageous in their life. They're like, oh my gosh, way to go, you rock. But the people that sometimes won't even take action are the ones that are judging you, because it's just a mere reflection of what you're, pointing back at them. So, but this goes back, like we'll circle back to the whole conversation about becoming yourself, like authentically speaking your truth and telling your story. And just the more you become you, whether you're becoming that through sharing your story or becoming that through like, hey, that doesn't work for me anymore. No, thank you. When we become ourselves, we're putting ourselves on in a pedestal or a platform, even if we don't have a business and a platform per se, in our own homes for people to give us feedback that sometimes we don't want to hear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not an easy experience, but I think it's an important one. And, as a writer, of course, there's so many different ways to take that conversation, but from a writer standpoint, to my mind immediately goes to editing, editor feedback and all that kind of stuff. And that's all a part of the process. And like you said, you take it forward into a more public arena and there's more feedback. But I think to me, that's why, to me, it's about, I just try to stay focused on doing the work, honestly. Make it about the work, not about the applause, just trying to focus on doing the best writing I can do. And at that point, you just have to give it up to the universe, I think.
And say, fuck you.
Take this, please do something good with it. Please.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. There was something greater than me flowing through me. Those are not my words. I think being open to feedback has been amazing. Every time I always like clam up a little bit, but I know that's just part of the defense mechanism in the human experience. And every time I clam up, like the feedback I receive is never what my brain thinks it's going to be. It's like I'm preparing for a tornado and it was just a little tiny raindrop that fell. And I'm like, oh, that's it. And that's in life. You get feedback and you're like, does that sit with me? Is that even the direction that I wanted to go in? It feels like everything is connected. It's all the same, just wearing a different mask or umbrella, whether it's writing or podcasting or the way you want to parent, the way you want to, what career you want to go for, like who you want to be in the world. We have to listen to ourselves and show up every single day for that creative inspiration that may not be there, but that is deep within us, and be committed to that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also where, and you talk so much about this, but valuing yourself in other words, valuing your contribution and what you do and just you for you is so important, because every bit of feedback each of us gets is not going to be gleaming and perfect and, oh, aren't you amazing? Like you said, we always get feedback we don't necessarily want. And I think that at the end of the day, that's why it's also so important, because these are all acts of vulnerability, putting yourself out there, putting your book out there, putting your podcast out there, putting your YouTube channel, whatever it is that you do, or just, being more of you in your home, your community, with, in whatever way that manifests. That all the feedback the kind of more you step out, that you are going to get some feedback you don't like. And this is why it's so important to value you. And each of us has to love ourselves, as corny as it sounds. And it's so much harder than it sounds too, but not to always make it about what they think. What did they say? Did they approve? Did they validate me? Right? Am I validating myself? How do I feel about this? Okay, there's feedback, but does that mean I have to decide that I suck, or just that, this paragraph needs to get edited?
Right.
So, I think always checking in with, what you're using as your primary meter. Is it what they think? Or, who are you? And can you still value yourself in the face of feedback that maybe, doesn't feel great in that particular moment?
That's a good one. Good to know. So every time you give me feedback, I'll be like, not feeling it. No. No, Whydham, you're off. You're off. This is my internal meter says no. Oh, I love you. Okay. One last question I have for you, and I know you and I could talk forever and ever and ever, and there's so many conversations we could have about writing and creativity, or the lack thereof, and continuously showing up for yourself. What has motherhood, or vice versa, taught you about writing?
To be brave. I think, when I became a mom, which was later than a lot of people become a mom, but I wanted to lead by example, I guess. And I've always, joked about being a scaredy cat, and, I didn't want him to feel burdened by that. So I was like, all right, I have to step up now, and I have to be brave in my life, because I can't ask him, to be brave in his if I can't show him by example how to do that. And so, yeah, I just have to say be brave. And there was one point when, at bedtime, he was, I don't know, 3 or 4, and he's like, "Mommy, tell me a story." And I remember the first time I froze, and I was like, I can't just think of a story. I'm a nonfiction writer. I would kind of like in my brain froze, but I mean, in that moment I knew I had to say, okay, yes, of course. And so I started making up these like silliest little stories, ridiculous. And there was and one in particular that he just absolutely died laughing over. I mean, it was the goofiest little story, but he thought it was so funny. And I've told him that story, some version of that story, probably, 100 times ever since. But yeah, absolutely. That I think that was definitely the impact, was to be brave for him.
Be brave and show up even when you feel you do not know the answer.
Yeah, even when you feel like it's not part of your identity too, right? I didn't identify myself as a fiction storyteller. And
speaking of fiction storytelling, Whydham.
Yes.
Do you have any fiction storytelling going on in the other aspects of your life?
I do have enough. Yes, I do. Which I don't really tell many people about, but which is why you're asking me about it. I know. Yeah, I did start working on a novel a few years back, and it's not done, but it's been it's been a very interesting journey. A very different journey as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm grateful to it. I mean, it's been, creatively as well as personally, emotionally, it's been an interesting ride. And I've learned so much about myself and about writing and about story and about all kinds of things. And so I don't know where it's going to take us, but I am going to finish it. I just haven't done that yet.
I love that. And we don't need to know. We just need to show up every single day.
Yeah.
Even when you don't want to, even when you think you're incapable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that has been really, a prominent experience of writing fiction, suddenly feeling like I can't do this. Like this sucks. This must be terrible. This is boring. This is,
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, I'm over 100,000 words in. I'm sure I'll edit many of those words out, but I have to finish it. I mean, I couldn't not finish it at this point. I put too much into it.
And when will that happen?
That's a good question. And I know I'm supposed to have an answer right now, and I don't.
You're like, when your damn book is done, Heather.
The problem is when your book is done, there's going to be another one. So, yeah.
I know.
Yeah. It's life.
It's so good. But this is the beauty of consciously creating your reality. You just got to show up and do what gives you joy, even if it scares the crap out of you.
Yeah, sometimes especially if it scares the crap out of you, I think.
Awesome. Yay. So what do you want the ladies to walk away with if they're sitting on the fence and they're like, I want to go. I feel like the one-day event is going to be a game changer for me. And they're listening to you. They're like, oh my gosh, now I'm even more intrigued. What do you want them to walk away with after doing the workshop with you?
I want them to walk away with, I'd like them to walk away with one thing they've written and a few more ideas of things they can write when after the event is what I want them to have at the end of it. And I want them to have a better sense of how they can use their story to bring value to the reader. We're going to focus on shorter format writing. I think we absolutely live in a short attention span world. Everyone's so distracted and busy, and it's really hard to get people's attention for a long time. So we're going to work on shorter format, which I think is really valuable. A lot of people want to jump to a book, but really that's not the best starting point. And we can talk more about that. But I really want to focus on short format. That's something that people can use right away, and start getting out to an audience and test driving it and getting feedback and going through starting the whole journey. And that's really the way to begin it.
I love this. Thank you. I always tell people you need the community first before that you can sell a product or service. But beyond that, if you want to make an impact, you don't need to know where life will take you. Like you said, you're like, I'm just going to be a writer, and you jumped into it. You didn't know it would get you to where you are today. So you just have to, you just have to take the first leap. So Whydham, I want to declare publicly my love for you. And, and I just want to say that for many years, I knew that this book needed to, I'm not going to say birthed, because you've talked to me many times about, it's a lot harder to have babies than to birth books. And I totally appreciate that perspective because it does take the pressure off. But I knew there was a book inside of me. There was something, it just wouldn't go away. And I was seeking and seeking and seeking. And when I found you, I was like, oh, she's going to help me. And I felt the pressure relieved. And every time, we get to our little milestones in the process, I cry my face off from a place of gratitude. And if it wasn't for you taking the leap and declaring your love of writing and stepping into that, I would have never met you. So I'm just grateful that you jumped into your light to allow me to do the same. And we can both be terrified in the process. So thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Working with you, I think has been It's been a great experience. I mean, we've also had so many laughs. I was telling you the other day, I was listening to our recordings and spent half the time giggling, really. But yeah, we've got a lot of fun ahead of us.
You know me, I always need to throw some humor in there to not only make it inappropriate, but just to be like, oh, let's make this easier. I think in general, we take ourselves way too seriously.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm excited to meet you in person. I've never met you in person, so I'll be seeing you in a few weeks.
Yes, absolutely. I am too.
Yay.